So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another map that actually someone did make, although I have actually shown this one before. I believe I actually showed this one in 0.96.1. It was about a year ago actually. I think I showed this map first. It's called the Desert Mesa. Now it isn't desert terrain as such because some of the changes in 0.97 did change around some of the existing maps to have different assets on them for some unknown reason. So yeah, it is called the Desert Mesa, but it's like sort of grassland terrain for the time being. But that's not really the most important thing. Having a look at the layout of this map, obviously there is a sort of the donut shape of high ground around the outside of it, and then there's this sort of fortress right in the middle of the sunken terrain as well. And all the armies, I think, sort of for fair play reasons, have deployed on the sunken terrain this time around, because obviously there are deployment zones that allow you to deploy up here on the centre for the teams that are on this side, which obviously wouldn't be terribly fair in an even battle like this. Although last time I showed it, of course, it was more of a scenario-like situation where there were defenders and they had to defend the central fortress here. But now, I suppose it's fair game to try and claim the fortress once the battle actually starts, but we shall see. We'll go through the army compositions, and seeing this as this is a 2v2, we'll go in for a little bit of a deeper dive on the armies, just to see what people have brought. It is a rather interesting array of factions. It's actually mostly Orcish factions with one Dwarven faction on the field today. Starting off with the blue team, we have Bloodbath McGrath, who's going to be playing as Mordor. So Mordor, interesting faction, probably not one of my favourites to be brutally honest. They are very effective at what they do, but their split between lower end troops and higher end troops is... you have to manage that correctly, and if you don't, then that's often your demise as Mordor. But if you do, you can be quite difficult to defeat and break down, which is, you know, why some people may like them. Temple Inquisitors, for example, very, very strong anti-cavalry cavalry unit. They're not multiple HP, but they're incredibly damaging with those two-handed swords that they use. Obviously no shields, which can be a bit of an issue, especially without the multiple HP, but having said that, if you can get them into melee, especially alongside your other anti-cavalry unit that you have available to you as Mordor, you can be incredibly difficult to kill on horseback, and you can do a lot of damage as well. You can be outnumbered. You know, Mordor's cavalry is probably the one aspect of their army where they can't just plaster the field with numbers and overwhelm their opponent, but in terms of quality, there are very few cavalry factions that are going to want to take you head on. We have the Adunheim Lancers, which is really Mordor's damage dealer. You know, they're the one sort of unit of cavalry Mordor has that isn't solely focused on taking out other cavalry first and foremost. Obviously they're Lancers, so they're going to be able to do a lot of good armor-piercing damage off the charge. We shall see if they're able to do that on this occasion. And then we also have the Melkor's Chosen, of course, which is the pinnacle of the Mordor cavalry force, really, the mighty Caragor riders themselves with those big maces, much in the same way as the Temple Inquisitors. They're absolutely devastating against other cavalry, only they do have a small shield, and also they have multiple HP, so they are the stronger variant, but of course they're more expensive, and they do stand out a little bit. The Caragors are not exactly subtle creatures, so as soon as you see them coming, you know, the opponent is going to be able to try and compensate appropriately to try and deal with them. We have some Temple Executioners back here without the armor upgrade. The General's going to be in this unit as well. Even without the armor upgrade, they're still an absolute monster of a unit, especially in a melee fight. They're super high base damage, and their really high melee defense is obviously the central pillar to any heavy swordsman unit, and the Temple Executioners are right up there alongside the likes of the Pharazim Swordmasters and Noldorin Blade Masters when it comes to overall effectiveness. Olag High as well. Like, Trolls are in a bit of an interesting position in 0.97. I remember back in vanilla, Trolls were very, very powerful. That isn't the case anymore, I think, because of the introduction of just many more types of units and many more weaknesses for the Trolls. They do certainly still have their place. They're still capable of dishing out a lot of damage very quickly, especially against more defensive units such as pikes and non-armor piercing spears. But you do need to be very careful, because if you send them in against high damage infantry like heavy axemen or heavy swordsmen or heavy macemen, they can take a lot of damage quite quickly, and they will peter out, and especially considering the amount you spend on them, that's not a worthwhile use of their efforts. And also cavalry. Like, they can do a lot of damage against cavalry in sustained melee, but very often you'll find Trolls getting charged by cavalry, and several of their unit models will be skewered instantly. So you do need to be on the lookout. Trolls are more challenging to use than they once were, but if you do use them correctly, they'll do enough damage for the rest of your highly numerous army to do the most of the legwork. Minas Morgul Chosen, so the heavy spears of Mordor, so again one of their more defensive units in nature. If you have them in the centre of your line, you'll be much more difficult to break down. They don't do an awful lot of damage, to be honest with you, like most spears of this type. The Spear Malice doesn't help them, their lower attack stats also don't, but they're very good at sort of absorbing a lot of pressure and sort of making your line a lot tougher than it otherwise would be. Sauron's Will, pretty much the exact opposite of that. Obviously, they, as heavy axemen like this, they tend to have lower melee defense. The lack of a shield as well makes them quite vulnerable to arrow fire. But high base attack, and of course the armor piercing delivered by those big serrated axes is a concern for anyone that fights them. We have some orc fodder over here on the side, so orc fodder of course free for the first unit. It's going to be interesting to see, I think, how the orc fodder perform in this particular battle. I think actually Mordor are going up against another orcish faction, so the orc fodder, they're free for the first unit, so you may as well bring them, because most of the time as Mordor you're probably not going to be filling out your entire army with units you're paying for, because they do have their share of expensive units which will take up most of their budget, so having a free unit available is never a bad thing. Full line of Morannon halberdiers as well, which is a useful tool for Mordor. Like, I'm sure that they would prefer to have pikes given the kind of faction that they are, but there's a good reason why they don't, and that's because Mordor, you know, if they swarmed and they had pikes as well, it would be incredibly difficult to deal with. Halberdiers though still have their place. For a start, unlike pikes, they out of phalanx formation they actually can be fairly useful just for dealing damage. They're still rather fragile if you do that, even more fragile than heavy axeman, but they can still function in that regard. But also the phalanx is the main event here, because it can still anchor the line even if it doesn't do so quite as effectively as pikes. The armor piercing also is very useful. Morannon infantry, the basic bread and butter of the Mordor army, nothing too special about them individually in terms of stats at all, but there are enough of them that they do the same sort of job as like a human man-armed unit for the most part. Orc maulers as well, so cheap, you know, axemen, heavy axemen. They're obviously going to suffer from all of the things that heavy axemen suffer from. Like, their problems are going to be exacerbated because of, you know, the tier of unit that they are. Low melee defense, very vulnerable to arrow fire, but if you get them into melee, they can do a lot of damage to the right targets, and considering the amount you pay for them, they can be a very efficient money sink for you. More Morannon, well, actually Morannon guard over here, so some spears, so he's gone for a lot of different kinds of units, to be fair. Pretty much the equivalent of the Morannon infantry, only spearmen, so obviously that comes with all the benefits and disadvantages that being a spear unit has. Spear malice, but better against cavalry, and also they have the shield wall. And finally the Blackguard Barad here at the back, just in case they need to push, and he has the numbers available to him that a push maybe would be okay. He's invested quite heavily in his cavalry though, and considering the narrow nature of this map, at least down on the sunken terrain, we'll see if that turns out to be a good thing. Now we move on to Lister. Lister is the player who made this map actually and sent me the battle replay, so big thank you to him, and very well done on the map. He's playing as his go-to faction in Angmar, so he's a brave man to represent Angmar, because not many people think too highly of Angmar, at least they're a strong faction, but obviously people don't like them too much because certain tools they have available to them, and their playstyle tends to be all or nothing, and when it's all, people don't like it when the orcs steamroller everything. But I personally quite enjoy Angmar, to be honest with you, and Lister clearly does too. Relatively easy faction to play, I would have to say, but well, easy to play, maybe harder to master. You know, there is if Angmar have their weaknesses exposed, it can be quite difficult to pivot. So I'm sure Lister is one of the players, you know, considering the amount he's played them, who has managed to get that down to a fine art. We have the Guardians of Khârn Dûm with the armor upgrade, so this is where Angmar can really where Angmar diverge from Mordor a little bit, is they don't have quite so many higher tier options available to them. But in the main bulk of their army, they have a significant amount more quality, especially when it comes to being tough to kill. And the Guardians of Khârn Dûm are a really good example of that. Obviously, they're far superior to the Morannon infantry, especially with the armor upgrade. They're still not as good as something like the Alcarondas Legion or the Remena Abarim from other factions, because they focus a little bit more on defense, a little bit more on their armor, a little bit more on their shields. They don't do their killing quite as efficiently, but they're still a very strong unit. The Witches are in there. I can see them poking through, and we shall see if they can do their thing. I'm sure people are hoping that they probably can. Gundabad Guard, Angmar halberds, so again, nice heavy spears, nice halberdiers in there as well. I think there's some orc maulers as well. Hard to tell really, because some of the lower tier units for Angmar do look very similar to one another. There's some Witcher-armed pikemen with the armor upgrades as well, so where Mordor don't have pikes, Angmar do, which is one of the other reasons why their rush can be so difficult to deal with. Like, if you allow them to anchor themselves in position with the pikes that follow in the initial wave, it can be very difficult to get rid of them. Gundabad Guard, Angmar halberds and Guardians of Khârn Dûm. Just in behind we see some Snaga Stalkers, some Witcher-armed Blackguard, some Hammer Guards, so the free unit for Angmar in front, the 2 units of Bodyguard Infantry, single unit of Trolls of Gundabad, and some Witcher-armed Inquisitors, so again, more anti-cavalry cavalry on the field for the blue team. It's going to be very difficult for the red team, if they've got any sort of Lancers, for them to get any sort of purchase on Mordor and Angmar. Just the 1 unit of Trolls though, interestingly enough, I think that's actually a good move, because 2 units of trolls in this situation could be quite difficult to deal with, especially against a faction with as much quality in it as Erebor here, played by Medtyr. Erebor are my personal least favourite faction in the game. You know, they're sort of my Angmar in many ways. I really don't like the way they go about their business, but that is just personal preference. So, you know, ironically, I'm going to be rooting for Angmar in this battle and hoping that their witches can grill some dwarves. But we got some iron for Hammerguard. I'd be interested to see how they perform actually against the Witch Realm Inquisitors, because they're very, very powerful against cavalry and melee as well. But we shall see. In terms of overall infantry strength, like Erebor is certainly a faction which can withstand a full-blooded Angmar advance as long as they're pointing in the right direction. The Ironfoot Warriors will be a good front line for that, because all of the basic Orc units like the Halberdiers, the Maulers, any Snaga Stalkers they come across will easily be dealt with by the trained Dwarven infantry. Anything higher tier from Angmar might be a little bit more worrying for them though, like the Halberdiers still have their armour piercing after all. The Guardians of Kharn are going to be difficult to kill quickly. They should still manage it, I think, the Ironfoot Warriors, especially if they've got an attack upgrade. But we shall see. Not that that's too much of a problem though, because the Erebor Legionnaires will absolutely have what it takes to defeat units like Guardians of Kharn. The only thing that they will come unstuck against are the really high tier units like the Hammer Guard, the Black Guard, excuse me, and maybe the Trolls as well. And just in behind we have the Ironfoot Spears making up another line, some Axe Guard of Erebor on both flanks. The AP will be very useful against Angmar, and then the elites, the Highborns, the Dragon Slayers, the Sons of Durin and the Obsidian Garden. This is another reason, in addition to the crossbows, why I don't like Erebor, because they can do this. They can have 4 units of really high tier elite infantry, and when you have this many elites, you effectively have their third line here, their tertiary line, is made up entirely of multiple HP, really high-end infantry units as well. When you consider them individually as well, like Highborns, Dragon Slayers, you know, Sons of Durin, they're some of the best infantry units in their class in the game, and there's 4 of them on the field here. It is worth saying, however, that they don't seem to have any ranged units, and this is the entirety of their army based on the budget, so they may have just played themselves really, because the Witchers now will have no ranged units going after them whatsoever, which may spell disaster for Erebor. We shall see. But this is what you get if you get greedy with the elite units. Like, you always want to bring your crossbows as Erebor, in my opinion. Like, I don't like them, but it is effective. And then finally we have No Yu playing as Isengard. He's got some Uruk-hai Raiders on the front line, a lot of Uruk-hai Raiders as well as a lot of Uruk-hai infantry over here. So this is interesting. Just having a look at their front line, they've obviously gone sort of full-blooded into their front line, both quality and quantity. So obviously they're expecting to go toe-to-toe with Mordor just in a pure numbers brawl, I imagine. And with Uruk-hai pikemen backing up the Uruk-hai infantry and raiders, they have every reason to believe that they would be successful in that endeavour. Uruk-hai Berserkers as well are a good choice, because most of Mordor's units, if they do have decent defences because of their armour, so the Uruk-hai Berserkers can crack right on through that. Isengard have brought their crossbows as well, so a wise man is No Yu, because he's going to be able to shoot Mordor cavalry and infantry alike. The Trolls, the White Hand, are also pretty much the equivalent of the Olag-hai, so neither side is going to have an advantage when it comes to that. But I think that's pretty much it for Isengard. A very simple army indeed, for the most part. Rush with a lot of AP, crossbows backing them up. We'll see what happens with regards to that, but I think the first engagements are going to be happening over on this side, because Erebor are going to need to pivot, and Mordor and Isengard are a little bit further apart from one another. So without further ado, let's begin. Like I said, I'm very surprised to see Erebor with 0 ranged presence on the field today. I mean, certainly in terms of their infantry, they should beat Angmar here. Like the Ironfoot Warriors at the front, the Legionaries backing them up. Axe Guard of Erebor are a really good choice against Angmar as well. That AP would be really, really useful against stuff like Guardians of Kharn. Kill them off quickly. The Ironfoot Spears for their formation, and then finally the pièce de la résistance, really, in all the elites for Erebor, which Angmar in melee, they're not going to be able to deal with all of these. Stuff like the Black Guard and the Hammer Guard are very strong, but the Sons of Durin are every bit the match, if not stronger, than the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. Similar story with the Black Guard, really, when you pit them up against stuff like the Highborns and the Dragon Slayers. And then obviously you've got the Obsidian Guard just in addition to that, just in terms of pure numbers. The Dwarves have got the advantage here, but maybe getting a little bit greedy, a little bit big for their boots, or no, they're going to turn around and charge, and yeah, like the Witch Realm Inquisitors actually losing their bottle a little bit there. Perhaps thinking that the Dwarven cavalry would continue to retreat. That did not turn out to be the case, and now they're facing off against one another, and the charge definitely favoured the Hammer Guard. But with the Trolls coming in here as well, the Hammer Guard are going to need to get out of there, so Angmar salvaging that situation, and with that charge actually from the Trolls, the the battle did actually change in favour of Angmar pretty briefly there. We'll see if this advance yields any results as Erebor move forward. The Ironfoot Warriors moving in, but they're moving in a little bit too far ahead of their support, to be honest with you. Not a particularly well planned out advance, but maybe he just feels as though he needs to get in here quickly before things take an ugly turn. Snaga Stalkers charging forward, getting in the way of the advancing Erebor legionaries. And obviously the Snaga will handily lose this fight, but they will at least prevent any reinforcements from arriving to the front line. And already you can see the first line of Erebor's Ironfoot Warriors starting to break. And this is the thing, like if you just send in a first line like this against the full might of your opponent's army, it's never really going to go well. Legionaries going up around the flank, the Ironfoot Spears trying to head to the aid of the Hammer Guard. And the Spears will do quite well against the Witch Realm Inquisitors, but they will not do very well against the Trolls at all. Exactly the sort of foe that Trolls like to fight. One that doesn't bite back all that much. But yeah, they need to get some of their elites in melee here, the Dwarves. I know I'm at half speed, but you can see the Axguard of Erebor trying to move around to the flanks. A really dense block of Angmar forces here, and this is, if Erebor are going to continue to go about the battle in this way, this dense block is exactly what the Doctor ordered from an Angmar perspective. Because, you know, Erebor are just going to slowly feed their men into this very defensive position. They are going to try and get around the flank now, which is definitely the right thing to do, but they need to send their elites in from the front and try and go about their business in that manner. Here's Isengard's full cavalry force, which was hidden up on the high ground. You can see the champions of the White Hand flanked by 2 Warg Riders, so it's an interesting cavalry fight over here. I mean, Mordor definitely have the advantage in terms of quality, but the fact that Isengard can actually contest the cavalry fight is all they really need, I think, because in terms of infantry, I think I would give the slight advantage here to Isengard just because they have crossbow support. The Berserkers will also be able to do a ton of damage in melee. The Uruk-hai infantry is better as a backbone to the army than any of the Morannon units will ever be. So Mordor are going to have to rely on stuff like their Temple Executioners to really do the business. The Orc Javelins here. There's also a Duneheim Shadowbows who are now setting up in position and are going to shoot. So it's going to make Isengard's life a little bit more uncomfortable because they're going to have to move in. Meanwhile, what do we have over here? Erebor Legionaries' victory seems certain now that they've flanked around the sides, but Angmar ready to reposition some of their halberdiers and their Witch Realm pikemen, prevent that from becoming too much of an issue. Hammerguard thinking about moving over here, but in come the elites now. Better late than never. The Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin going to be coming in here. But will they have the support available to them for these elites to now be good? Because I mean, the Ironfoot Warriors are already all gone. You can see, well, I say all gone, there's still 1 unit of them over here fighting. Sons of Durin and Obsidian Guard trying to move around the flank, as are the Hammer Guard. Up here on the hill, the Witch Realm Inquisitors getting bogged down a little bit too much in Ironfoot Spears. But the Trolls are, of course, already taking a pretty grisly toll on these spears. They're continuing to try and charge through there. That's exactly the right thing to do from Erebor. Force pathing your unit through a unit you don't want to fight and try and go after the juicy cavalry unit here. And the spears are going to make it there as well. So the cavalry is going to need to get away from there because already, you know, Angmar started off quite well in this fight. Everything went to code for them, albeit more due to mistakes from Erebor than anything else. But what would really worry me at this point, if I were an Angmar player, would be this. I mean, the Hammer Guard, they're still a pretty healthy sized unit as well at 21. So if they can charge into the back of this Angmar line, it could be devastating. Because I mean, Angmar's morale is not really the best, let's be honest. But will they pick their charge correctly? Would be my question of the Hammer Guard. They're going to charge in here. Not exactly the best of positions to charge into. They will do a lot of damage to the Angmar halberds, that's for certain. But the halberdiers are also one of those units which can bite back if you let them. And speaking of which, there's a unit of 3 halberds pretty much over here which can be used to try and zone this Ironfoot Hammer Guard out. But that's only really useful if they're still winning on the front line. And with units like Dragon Slayers, where'd those Witchers go to? Well, there they are. But I mean, the Witchers are wide open here for a charge from the Hammer Guard. So I mean, that would be... If I were the Erebor player, I'd be desperately trying to kill the Witchers, because if I'm Erebor, I'm thinking my quality can see me over the line still, in spite of losing the initial engagement with the Ironfoot Warriors. I think that as long as I take away the Witchers, all of my quality units should be enough, alongside stuff like my Axe Guard and my Erebor Legionaries, to win me this battle. Angmar are good in melee, but they're not good in the same ways that Erebor are. well, I mean, they were going for them. They were doing the right thing by charging into them, and they should still make it, to be honest with you. Like, it was a damaging volley to the Ironfoot Hammer Guard, but they're going to continue their charge, and they are going to make it to the Witches. Point blank hits here. A good charge, but those point blank hits may have just saved the Witches' bacon there, because they have routed the Hammer Guard, but that's a lot of ammunition for the Witches to use on a unit of cavalry like that. Will they still have enough ammo? I mean, they should. If they hit centre mass into all these dwarves, they should have enough, but now the tables have turned, because now the Inquisitors are back here with no cavalry to stop them. They could be able to charge in, and to be fair as well, Erebor don't have the most anti-cavalry left available to them, except for those spears that are still floundering over in the distance. We shall see what goes on there, but the engagement's now happening over here. Isengard being forced to move forward by the Mordor Rangers. But in terms of just outright strength on the front line, with the pikes and Uruk-hai infantry combined, you'd give the advantage here to Isengard. Raiders also coming up around the side, but they're meeting a lot more resistance, especially when you consider Temple Executioners and Minas Morgul Chosen. They'll easily be able to defeat Uruk-hai Raiders, to be honest with you. Light work for them indeed. Temple Inquisitors also. Victory seems certain for the Uruk-hai Berserkers, mind you, and yeah, combined with the Trolls, Warg Riders, chasing off the Melkor's Chosen and the Temple Inquisitors, but they really need their Uruk-hai Berserkers on the front line, to be honest with you. They were the powerhouse, the AP, that was really going to offer Isengard a lot of strength here, but that's not really coming to pass. So maybe a bit of a misjudgment there. The crossbows also don't have the best of angles for a shot. We shall see. I mean, I don't think it was the most well thought out advance. Like, they needed their Berserkers right up the pipe. Keep the Trolls with the Wargs to deal with the Mordor cavalry, sure, but also I can't help but notice that Isengard's cavalry is sort of still running away over here. Here in the corner. Champions the White-Handed Warg Riders, like, they need to be taking the bull by the horns and trying to stop the Mordor cavalry here. The Warg Riders are, but you can see over here with the Uruk-hai Raiders routing, the Trolls are in here, but they'll easily be dealt with by Temple Executioners, and now Mordor have the opportunity to wrap up the line of Isengard here, and that could be grisly. Because again, these Raiders are also going to lose. The further down the line we go, the better the fight looks for Isengard, but they're not going to win this fight quickly enough. I mean, it's made up of pikes and infantry, this advance, which slowly but surely will grind the enemy down, but as soon as Mordor start wrapping up the line, that's going to be where the pikes really start to come unstuck. Meanwhile, let's see what's happening over here. Witch Realm Inquisitors, looks like they've charged in over here because the Dwarven line is now looking very thin indeed. Let's go back up to 1 speed now. Axeguard of Erebor fighting on the front line still, but Ironfoot Hammer Guard. I mean, it's over here where the Dwarves have got a lot of their elites, but now the Highborns are being overwhelmed. The Axeguard, yeah, it's a matter of the charges here, the rear charges coming in. I mean, now the Ironfoot Spears are here, but the Witch Realm Inquisitors will easily be able to get away from there. There's still some Trolls up there as well, but actually they've lost. They have lost to the Ironfoot Spears ultimately. Isolated as they were, some Ironfoot Warriors that have returned. It's a very interesting fight this. I mean, Angmar, if they do end up winning this, will certainly come out the other side looking much worse for wear. But I think, you know, they're in a good position to do so here. I mean, the Witch Realm Inquisitors are here. If you're going to rush in the way that Erebor have, you need to deal with your opponent quickly. If you get caught up on them, stuff like this is more likely to happen, and you will really start to struggle to deal with it. And over here, with the pikes from the front, with the cavalry charges from the back, it's not looking good for Erebor over here. They're in a position where Angmar will certainly feel quite comfortable. Obsidian Guard coming in from the rear though. Excuse me. Obsidian Guard, they're a strong unit and they should be able to keep this fight going for a little bit longer, but like I said, I don't see Erebor recovering from this. I mean, there are the Ironfoot Spears, Ironfoot Warriors, more reinforcements on the way, but again, I just don't think it's going to be enough. We'll see. Only half the Angmar force, but like the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard have been central in the army, surrounded by support, whereas Erebor, some of their elites have been far more isolated, far easier to kill with certain things. Angmar Halberd starting to rout now. Over here, meanwhile, Olagkai, victory seems certain. doing the business here against a lot of the Uruk-hai, although I say that, like, the Uruk-hai should win that, to be honest with you. Temple Executioners coming in now, and you can see actually where the Uruk-hai have been. There goes the Erebor general over on the other side of the field. But where the Uruk-hai have been, the Mordor infantry has folded, and actually rear charges from the champions of the White Hand, probably helping matters as well. Orc javelins now being killed off by Uruk-hai infantry, so in the end it may be that Mordor's flanking move wasn't quick enough, and also now Uruk-hai crossbows are shooting in over here. They're actually hitting the Moran Guard when they should really be hitting the Temple Executioners in the back. Dealing with the Temple Executioners would be a huge win. Uruk-hai Raiders also now over here alongside the Uruk-hai Berserkers doing the damage to the Minas Morgul Chosen, and Minas Morgul Chosen, exactly the kind of unit that the Uruk-hai Berserkers will enjoy fighting. So they will be very pleased with how things are developing. Sauron's will coming back now, but yeah, that was the issue here. Like, Isengard, their front line of Uruk-hai was just so much stronger than the Morannon front line from Mordor. And in the end, that was the difference maker. And the support from the crossbows in the back, as well as the champions of the White Hand getting over here and rear charging. Like, just based on the distribution of the corpses over here, what I can assume happened was the Mordor cavalry lingered too long in range of the crossbows and ended up getting shredded by the crossbow fire. And that, of course, left the champions of the White Hand free to come in and rear charge the Mordor lines, which, obviously, with the Uruk-hai already winning those fights, that was just going to pour salt into the wounds, really. So yeah, the crossbows really were the key here, I think, and it's one of the reasons why I'm surprised Erebor didn't bring them, because if you do rush and you've got crossbows in behind the lines, it can be a really good anchor. Like, crossbows are so effective. Like I keep saying, like, especially, you can see there the Warg Riders also, and obviously cavalry superiority once it's been gained is also so important in this situation. But yeah, I think Mordor, they'll probably be regretting going so cavalry heavy and not using it to its fullest effect, because with 3 cavalry units, to be honest, those 2 crossbow units should have been swallowed up whole. But Isengard, I think, did just about a good enough job defending them, and Mordor just didn't bob and weave enough to get in there. I mean, to be fair, Isengard's army is still fairly damaged, but it's still a decent victory over here, I have to say. Speaking of which, over here, there goes the Mordor general, charged down by wargs and their rusted blades. So, Angmar are going to be victorious over here and Isengard on the other side. But both of the armies that are surviving are looking pretty worse for wear. I'd say Isengard have more numbers, but Angmar have individually the more damaging units. Like, they've still got 53 Blackguard in there, 32 Hammerguard, whereas really the only elite Isengard infantry unit they had were the Uruk-hai Berserkers, and I would imagine that they've probably taken a decent amount of damage themselves, 42 of them. As soon as the hit points are gone from a Berserker unit, they're pretty easy to kill, to be honest with you. And the final vestiges of the Mordor army also being dealt with, so we're down to sort of a pretty evenly matched battle overall so far. Angmar and Isengard have beaten their opponents by similar margins. The thing that I think will give Isengard a good amount of encouragement is the fact that crossbows do seem to have a bit of ammunition left, so a few volleys into the right units from Angmar could really make it difficult for them to break down what Isengard have left. Just the fact they've got pikes left alive in the numbers they have. Also, they have cavalry, Warg Riders and Champions of the White Hand. I mean, I think, yeah, they've still got Witch-Arm Inquisitors, but they're much more damaged than the Isengard offerings, and the Champions of the White Hand in general are actually the more damaging melee cavalry unit as well. So we shall see how this goes. I mean, it's going to be a fairly short and sweet fight, I think, when it actually does get underway. But Angmar, actually, interestingly enough, have probably got the ability to try and seize the high ground, although I don't think that'll do them much good when all is said and done. Isengard are the ones with the ranged advantage, after all. So just taking stock of what they have left, obviously the 2 units of crossbows, they have some scattered units of pikes, they still have some Uruk-hai infantry that's in decent shape, which is going to be necessary to deal with what Angmar still have available to them. Isengard and Angmar, certainly of the Orc factions, are the 2 Orcish factions that have a little bit more of a focus around their infantry. Let's see here. I say a little bit more of a focus around their quality infantry, whereas the Misty Mountains and Mordor, they still have an infantry focus, but it's certainly more based around quantity. Sort of getting closer and closer together now. I mean, it's going to be... The shape of this engagement will take shape very quickly, I think. Because, again, if the crossbows are able to do some pretty significant damage early, I would really worry for Angmar's chances as the fight goes along. But if Angmar can get up close and personal, use those elite infantry units, make it so they're not easily charged in the rear by what's left of the Isengard wargs, and they should be okay, excuse me. I mean, I say that, I think Angmar have actually got more pikes left than Isengard in this situation. I think the Witch Realm pikemen fared far better in their fight against Erebor than the Uruk-hai did in their fight against Mordor, which is interesting. Gundabad Guard also on the front line, heavy spears. Like I said, I think in terms of individual quality, I would give the edge here to Angmar, especially with those two units at the back there, but they're going to need to move into position pretty quickly. Just, again, those crossbow volleys are going to be a problem. Technically speaking, Erebor are alive as well. Could come to the aid of Isengard here as well with the 45 Ironfoot spears, which is not an insignificant amount of units, to be honest with you. There's also Snaga Stalkers heading over to support the Angmar line. Dwarven spears, they're still not the most damaging unit, but a rear charge from them could be enough to break an Angmar section of the line if they commit at the right moment. Gundabad Guard trundling their way into position as well. Slowly but surely moving forwards. Interesting terrain here though. I don't think... I mean, Isengard, if they could just get up onto this slightly higher ground, they would have a perfect vantage point for their crossbows, which would make life really, really difficult for Angmar. Uruk-hai Raiders. Yeah, like Uruk-hai Raiders are not really going to be worth a great deal, much like the Snaga Stalkers in this fight. I think it's going to come down to the quality on both sides. The pike lines smashing together, like, it's going to come down to either Angmar's quality, like I said, or Isengard's crossbowman. Also, the Ironfoot spears need to keep pace with the Angmar advance here. They're getting a little bit too far away. If they're going to be useful, they need to be ready to sandwich Angmar with Isengard, but this is where the first engagement is going to happen. We'll see how many volleys of these bolts they're able to get off, and what they actually decide to shoot at. I mean, when it comes to crossbows, it doesn't matter a great deal. Well, they hit there the Gundabad Guard, and a few of the Gundabad Guard did fall away. If they'd waited just a little bit longer, actually, they probably would have hit the Witch Realm Hammer Guard full in the face. But it's actually a well thought out advance. It's like the Gundabad Guard are leading the way, absorbing the fire. They're still a good unit, so it's not an ideal situation, but it's better than allowing the Witch Realm Hammer Guard to take the hits, or the Black Guard. Warg Riders pulling back. Angmar can't afford to just hang around here though, they need to keep their advance going. They've committed now, they're in range of the Isengard crossbowmen, they need to keep moving. The longer they delay as well, the more likely it is that dwarven reinforcements arrive. Albeit with the cavalry and the Snaga back there, I think they should be just fine. Ooh, Champions of the White Hand moving around. What are they going to try and do here? The Snaga revealed now, and now they're going to take a bit of a charge. That should be enough to break them, to be honest with you, even if it wasn't the best of charges. I can see what Lister was trying to do there. Catch the Champions of the White Hand on his Snaga and then move in with his Witch Realm Inquisitors, but the numbers are so far in favour of the Champions of the White Hand that even with a well thought out plan like that, it's not going to be enough to deal with the Champions, unfortunately. There goes a general. I think that was actually the Isengard general, interestingly enough. Uruk-hai crossbows out of ammunition now, which is significant, because now it means that the Black Guard and the Halberds together should be enough to deal with the Berserkers. And on the front line, with the superior amount of pikemen, without any crossbow bolts coming in, ooh, Witch Realm pikemen starting to rout. That's not ideal. I was about to say, with the numbers they had, Angmar might be able to pull this out of the bag without any crossbow bolts moving in. It's a very hotly contested fight, this. Hammer Guard still over here, but with cavalry charges in the rear, I would not be feeling too confident about Angmar's chances here. And also the Halberdiers, they took a little bit too long there to turn around, and that should be enough to break them as well. They managed to hold on just about. The close proximity of the Black Guard probably helping matters there. More cavalry charges though. Witch Realm pikemen. There are still Witch Realm Inquisitors coming in here trying to help finish off the wargs. Witch Realm pikemen routing 69 pikes. Routing is difficult to come back from. The dwarves are still slowly but surely making their way over, not exactly known for their speed. Gundabad Guard starting to rout now as well, so the Isengard line looks as though it's going to hold resolutely as it did against Mordor. More rear charges coming in. There was a full frontal charge onto the halberds though, bold to say the least. There's still these Blackguard though. 43 Blackguard is not easy to kill off at all. They should have the numbers to do so if Angmar don't have any other support to give them, but you never can tell. The fear effect is a big one and the Blackguard have it. Witch Realm pikemen have returned from routing, but is it going to be too little too late? Champions of the White Hand have certainly taken an awful lot of damage. Probably from charging headfirst into halberdiers, but needs must. And the damage they've done might be enough to give Isengard the victory in the end. Uruk-hai Raid's defeat seems certain. What are they fighting other than the pikes that would make that so? That doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, now it flips back the other way. Meanwhile, Uruk-hai infantry over there that are just sort of trying to delay the pikemen getting back to the fight. Rightly so as well. They're trying to destroy the Hammer Guard, but the Hammer Guard here might be able to fight their way out, and it might come down to the fact that Isengard just don't have the quality left to deal with the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard. The Ironfoot Spears are coming in as well. Yeah, Angmar are going to win over on both flanks, especially with the pikes returning from routing. So yeah, in the end, Isengard's composition may have been ideal for fighting Mordor, but in the end they didn't have enough infantry quality. Like they didn't have something like the Nars Kai or the Guards of Orthanc to tie everything together here in the late game. In come the Ironfoot Spears to try and help out, but not exactly the heroes that they needed. Witch Realm Hammer Guard have probably racked up a very healthy kill count for themselves as this battle has gone along. Meanwhile over here as well, the Witch Realm Inquisitors still standing just about, Witch Realm pikemen doing their thing. And rolling over. The Uruk-hai pikemen are going to try and come in over here. Obviously the pikes, you know, if you're going to have a unit which can try and equalise this fight, the range that pikes offers you may be the way to go, but ultimately I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to pan out in the way that Isengard want to here. The Blackguard are just too strong at this late stage, and this comes down to really the Dwarves of Erebor not doing enough damage with their elite units. Like you'd expect the Blackguard and the Hammer Guard to have been through the ringer against 4 elite Erebor units, but in the end they just weren't able to do that. And that comes down to composition. Erebor picked the wrong composition here. They needed at least, I'd say, bring a couple of units of Ironfoot crossbows, or just a single unit of Blacklock Engineers would have been enough to tilt that fight heavily in favour of Erebor, I think. As the rain continues to fall, Angmar will be victorious, everyone's favourite faction. Ironfoot Spears are wavering. The fear effects will really be starting to come into play now as we enter the very final phase of this fight, but very close, to be honest with you. There's not much of Angmar left alive. Hammer Guard and Blackguard, as well as a few pikes only, and the Inquisitors, a very small proportion of the army they started off with. The kind of close fight that you want to see, but Isengard with the most kills, which, not too surprising. Mordor had the biggest army on the field and they were victorious there, and then they were also able to do some damage to the stragglers of Angmar that came in to defeat them ultimately. Erebor as well. Like I said, I think that this battle was actually decided by Erebor's composition more than anything else, because it played into Angmar's hands. Erebor is not a good matchup for Angmar, I don't think. If Angmar don't have the ability to impose a really high infantry advantage on someone, they can start to struggle. That is one of their weaknesses, I think, and Erebor is certainly a faction that can do that. Any Dwarven faction is going to be able to do that. And infantry-wise, Erebor had the advantage there. Like, they had the 4 elite units, they had lots of quality, they had some support from spears and warriors, but it wasn't a balanced composition at all. What would have tilted that, I think, would be get rid of even something like the Erebor Legionaries and get a couple of units of Ironfoot crossbows and Blacklock Engineers, because that would have changed the dynamic of the fight entirely. You could have focused down the Witches when you saw them. You could have zoned out the Isengard, the Angmar cavalry very, very easily with them, and you could also have really helped tilt the infantry advantage even further in your favour. And in the end they weren't able to do that, but even as it was, even with a composition which was relatively poorly suited, they still were able to do a lot of damage to Angmar. It wasn't enough in the end, but they were still able to do a decent amount of damage. Over on the other side, Isengard, you know, the quality, you know, the more professional focus they have over Mordor really did make the difference there. Like the Uruk-hai were able to deal with the Morannon faster than Mordor were able to try and wrap up the line. And a big part of that was the crossbows. The fact that Isengard brought their crossbows meant that their backline wasn't completely defenseless against stuff like the Melkor's Chosen and the Adunheim Lancers, which is why things didn't go as well for Mordor as they did for Angmar. And that was the difference between the two. But in the end, Isengard's composition as well, like it had quality there, like it had Berserkers, it had Champions of the White Hand. It was a very balanced army, which for Mordor, fighting off against one opponent is good. But in the end, they didn't have any show-stopping units in the late game, show-stopping infantry units in the late game, which were able to sort of bring down the Hammer Guard or the Blackguard. The Blackguard was still in too good a condition, to be honest with you. They didn't have enough ammunition either. Like, I was thinking they had more ammunition than they did, but thinking back, obviously they must have used a lot of their ammunition on the Mordor cavalry and infantry to deal with them as efficiently as they did. And yeah, like that was the difference. Like, you know, without any crossbow bolts left, they were always going to be at the mercy of the sheer quality of the Hammer Guard and the Blackguard, and so it turned out to be. The Witchers weren't actually too devastating, I don't think, in this battle. They did their damage. Like, they stopped the Erebor from using their Hammer Guard to devastate Angmar's backlines, and that was important because otherwise Erebor could have that was another way Erebor could have gone on to equalise that fight quite efficiently. I have to say, I think for two names I haven't seen play the game before, they did quite well, both of them, to be honest with you. I think No You especially to defeat Bloodbath is a pretty good effort. Isengard are a good faction, I think, very balanced, and the power of crossbows certainly helps you, but still. Very good performance, I think, from everyone involved, newer players and veterans alike. Let's see what did the damage for Angmar. However, unsurprising to see the Hammer Guard rack up the kill count. Obviously, with their AP being on the front line against the Dwarves for so long, you're always going to get a lot of kills, especially with the ill-fated initial advance of the Ironfoot Warriors, which is another thing I think the Erebor player could stand to brush up on. If you're going to rush, you need to rush in much more of a cohesive unit and not send in your first wave too far ahead of your reinforcements, otherwise they're just going to get cut to pieces, as was proven here. The Blackguard doing quite well, the Temple Inquisitors also. Lots of units breaking 100 kills, which against Dwarves and Isengard is a pretty good showing, especially from Guardians of Khârn Dûm, which are more defensive in nature, not exactly well known for their ability to kill quickly. The Pikemen, obviously, just on merit of them staying alive for as long as they did, the Pikemen are going to rack up a decent kill count. The Gundabad Guard not doing quite so well, but that's not surprising with their Spear Malus against the heavily armoured Dwarven legions. And the Witchers only with 30 kills. I mean, most of those 30 kills did come against Ironfoot Hammer Guard, but it does go to show that, you know, Witchers, they don't necessarily need to devastate the enemy army to be effective, I suppose. This was a situation where it's kind of the happy middle ground, where the Witchers weren't useless, but they weren't devastating either. This was a good example of them doing a job for their army and making sure that Erebor couldn't use their one cavalry unit to devastating effect. The real MVPs here were the Angmar elite infantry units, I think, as well as the Inquisitors. The Witch Realm units in general, as well as the Pikes, did very, very well. So the Witch King clearly choosing his soldiers, his elite soldiers, wisely. And it's not too surprising. Like, Lister has played plenty of Angmar, so you'd expect him to be very adept in their use, and it's not too surprising, I think, that the names that I recognise, the veteran players, were able to be on the winning side here today. But it was a close battle, and I have to say that the Erebor and Isengard players did very well. As for what's next, obviously this was a slightly shorter battle because, again, like, schedule dictates that sometimes I can't do the monsters that I, like Grimslade or Osgiliath, purely because obviously I can't really risk the crash. Like, if I'm going to get a video out, it needs to be something like this, and obviously it's nice to see a map that has had some creativity put into it as well. It's always good to see. As for what's next, it might be another Dwarven theme map, because I might be making a return to Moria. I'm not sure. Like I said, the quest to inject a bit of variety into my channel continues, but again, like I said, with the schedule being what it is, like, it's a master's degree in the UK is it's 1 year, whereas in most other parts of the world I think it's 2, so it's heavily condensed. It's a very intense process, so it's one of the reasons why I'm sort of not really able to change as much as I would like, because I simply don't have the time to do so. But yeah, I'm doing my best to try and make some new stuff happen, but obviously for the time being, like, the regular schedule will happen, because it's a workflow that I'm comfortable with So it will continue as is. I'd like to do some more Silmarillion as well, but I haven't been given any Silmarillion replays, and because of my schedule I haven't been able to play any myself to acquire any replays, so we'll see. I mean, hopefully some Silmarillion will happen in the next week or 2 weeks, but the next battle will likely be another Reforged replay, or next video should be another Reforged replay. And like I said, hopefully some new stuff on the horizon as well, but it depends on my schedule, it depends on other people's schedule. Like I said, we shall see. Moria is one candidate for the next battle replay that we will show, and there's also a couple of others as well. Like Rules sent me a Linden Dwarven sort of encounter, but I think that was a field battle, which means I'll probably do a siege next after this one, and then do that one the following battle. So that's probably the most likely order that we're going to be doing things, but we shall see. Regardless, hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.